That's a really good question. One of the struggles that we had with the Witch Doctor zombie dog in particular was figuring out why would I choose to plague my dog or light it on fire? What are the situations that I would choose one versus the other? Is the gameplay supposed to be that the player's trying to keep the fire on the dog all the time, but it keeps falling off? Or is it that for some situations I want a fire dog, and for some situations I want a plague dog? There was also issues where sometimes players would see this loud, fiery dog on their screen and not really know how it got there because they didn't realize their skill did it, so there were some readability issues. So when we toned down the fire effect, though, it made it hard to know whether it was actually on fire or not. So we had a bunch of different difficulties on it, mostly in terms of communicating it to the player and having it be a meaningful gameplay decision as you went along. We still want to keep the idea of customizing your dog in different ways, and one of the ways we'll probably look at doing that is through either additional skills or the rune system, which Jay mentioned earlier today. We weren't able to show at BlizzCon this year, but that's definitely a whole other level of customization on skills which isn't even being shown right now.
Hi, my name is Henry, and I have a couple ideas phrased in the form of a question. First off, phasing in Diablo 3. Wouldn't that be awesome to change the environments based on the quests that you do? And speaking of quests, class-specific quests. I think it'd be awesome to implement quests where 8 barbarians have to join in and jump over chasms or whatever it is they have to do. And if you implement that, what are my stock options like?
I'll take the phasing question, then I don't know, Leonard, if you want to get or you or Michael can get the question or idea. So the phasing technology is really cool. Those of you who don't know what that is, if there's not a World of Warcraft fans here, I'm sure there's one or two. It's all right. We like that game too. It's a really cool technology they have to be able to change the world dynamically over time, change the terrain, change the NPCs and what's in the world. Currently, we don't have any technology like that. Our game is not a persistent world in the same way that an MMO is. So it's not been a high priority for us to develop a technology like that. If we want to change our world, our story is a bit more linear, it's easier for us to do that. That technology is pretty, even though we've already developed it for another game, putting it into our engine would not be trivial. It would actually be really time consuming. So until we see some kind of obvious benefit, we probably won't explore something like that. It's a cool idea, and maybe one day we will. Maybe one day we'll find a use, or we'll constrain against the game that we have and want to add something like that. And I'll let the Quest guys take the Quest question.
So one of our goals with Diablo 3 is that we really want to expand the story and the character of the heroes of the game. There are a lot of ways we're doing that. One of the ways you might have noticed is that there's a lot more dialogue for the hero characters. They will participate in conversations. They have very specific characters, and I think that with that being our goal, Class Quest sounds like a great idea.
Good afternoon. A very frustrating part of Diablo 2 is to fight hell-level bosses and have some scrub join your game and loot all the gear, and none of you guys who actually fought the boss get any of the gear. How will item looting work in Diablo 3 with regards to unique items and elite unique items?
Oh, have I got an answer for you? I love this. Is my favorite question. All items already in Diablo 3 are dropped on a per-player basis. So every monster that dies has a chance to drop loot for every player in the game. I say a chance because some creatures don't drop loot, but a boss, he would drop loot for every player. And you would see your loot, and your friend would see their loot, and the scrub would see his loot, but you wouldn't be able to see each other's. So you can pick up any item you see on the ground. It's pretty much for you.
Hi. I was wondering if from Diablo 1, the expansion, Hellfire, have you considered implementing the cornerstone of the world to trade items between your own accounts?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that Hellfire is not actually a Blizzard expansion. It was developed by another company, so we don't recognize it as an official part of the Diablo universe. That being said, it doesn't really matter with the question you're asking, but there will be a way to transfer items between your characters. We haven't decided exactly what method we're going to use, but it absolutely will be in the game.
I really like Diablo's story and all the classes, but I'll admit I'm a point-and-click noob. It's something I've never been able to get my head around. So has the gameplay format become more new player-friendly?
In terms of like how you experience the story, or
Fighting, spell using, just combat.
I don't know. I mean,
I think that's more of a usability question than to use a really official game development kind of highfalutin word. In terms of introducing to the player, we spend an enormous amount of time designing and redesigning our UI over and over again. And we're going to put in a tutorial system that will introduce players to new elements, and we're going to try and make it fairly robust. So we do think that Diablo's a pretty easy game to play. That being said, you can't rest on that fact. You have to make sure that your players have a really easy introduction to the game so that they can they can get into it very easily. I know a lot of us kind of hardcore gamers are like, how hard can it be? But the truth is, like, we want the Diablo 3 community to be as big as it can possibly be, and that's good for all of us. And if we can make the game really easy to get into and really easy to understand, that's a big barrier taken out of the way to be able to accomplish that.
Hi, I have a comment and a question. My comment is that in a BlizzCast, you stated that a lot of creatures have a anatomical system with a skeleton, muscle, and skin separate, like the 1,000-pounder. I just think it would be really cool if I hit something so hard that chunks of their flesh, muscle, and bone fly off of them. And that's for my question. You specifically used the word rune for the skill customization. I was wondering, will runes be making a reappearance, or will we have to rely on gem words, per se, for customizing loot?
So let me just talk about the chunks of flesh falling off people. There's a pretty good chance you're going to see some of that, so we're definitely here to please.
So the question on runes. Runes are, rune words is I think what you're specifically asking. Are we going to have rune words? No, we're not planning on having rune words because runes are our new skill customization system. That being said, I think the greater question is, are we going to have crafting? And the answer there is no comment yet. And you can read into that whatever you want.
if you play the demo right now, there is a chance that you will see skeletons flying out of creatures when you hit them hard enough, so.
So the question is, have you been hitting them hard enough?
So my question is that music plays a big part in the Diablo series, and will in Diablo 3 have the different zones with their own tone and feel, and when can we get a sample of those?
You're definitely going to get a huge variety of music in Diablo 3 for sure. Right now, it's hard to keep up with the art guys because they crank out so much awesome stuff, so the sound department is always a little behind them, and we always will be until the very end. But you're going to get some really specific stuff. For now, you're only going to hear what we demo at the show, and we're going to release very little of it on the website as well. So you're just going to hear a smattering until we finally put the game out.
My question was about projectiles. A lot of people at this point are pretty certain that the last class may or may not have something to do with like bows or javelins. And the thing is, in Diablo 2, stuff like that was like so slow and inaccurate. The fact that mobs wandered made your attacks almost completely useless in many occasions. So I was wondering if you're going to do a new system for how projectiles move, either by a possible new class, NPCs, or even with wizard spells. Because in the similar Diablo 2, I remember the sorceress skill, I think it was like static discharge or something, which released a whole bunch of static, which was uncoordinated, was basically completely useless unless you were completely surrounded.
Get that. So I think the skill you're talking about is Charge Bolt. Does everyone here think Charge Bolt was completely useless? Because I think
I love Charge Bolt.
Okay. I'm just curious because I actually thought when you level it up pretty high, it was pretty awesome. But no, we don't really intend to have any kind of specialty system for projectiles. The weakness of projectiles is that they don't always hit. And that's part of their design. If I would say if you don't like that weakness, then that's the reason why we have customizable characters. So you can design all kinds of different ways to do your character. Now that being said, I could see us focusing on, say, a skill that had extremely fast projectiles, such that it didn't have that weakness as much, and that would be a good focus for a particular build. In terms of what the last class is, we're not going to comment on that at all until we actually announce it.
Yeah, I would also add about the skills and just to speak to the customizability. I think that when a player has to choose between, for example, a fast projectile versus one that instantly hits versus one that's slow, that can be an interesting playstyle choice. One that can be modified by runes potentially. I mean, at last year's BlizzCon, we showed that there was the magic missile skill is a great example. And the magic missile, actually, we did find that if a monster is moving, perpendicular to you, it can be hard to hit. And so one of the rune options that we showed last year was to have multiple missiles come out. And that's not unlike the Amazon's multi-shot, which was how a lot of Amazons wound up playing. And so there's definitely a trade-off there that the player is making, because maybe the person should have had faster magic missiles rather than more, or maybe they should have just had them do more damage, or maybe modify some other aspect. And so a lot of that will be done through player customization.
My question is regarding the skill trees. In previous Diablo installments, the skills of most, if not all, the characters seemed really reflective of PvE gaming experience, and we kind of had to get creative with how we used those PvE skills in dueling. Are you going to have skill builds with dueling in mind, or PvP, or are you going to keep it more with the PvE and the how we did it before?
So we don't talk a lot about PvP because we haven't really announced anything specific, but I will say that part of supporting PvP better is actually developing our characters as both PvE and PvP characters. PvE is always our first focus, and we're always going to balance for that first. But we are going to develop runes and skills and make some minor changes to skills, as long as they don't make the game, we don't want to make the characters too weak or go away from Diablo. But